Science says walking at this specific time burns 30% more fat. Here's why. And before you think this is just another walking video, stay with me, because what researchers have uncovered about the precise timing, pace, and structure of a morning walk is genuinely unlike anything the mainstream fitness world has been telling you. Most people believe that fat loss is almost entirely about how hard you work out. The harder the sweat, the more fat you burn. That logic seems reasonable. It's also, according to the science of exercise physiology, fundamentally incomplete. There is a specific window of time in your morning, a biological state your body naturally enters while you sleep, that makes even a moderate 10-minute walk exponentially more effective at burning stored fat than almost any gym session you could do at 2 in the afternoon. And the reason most people never tap into this window isn't laziness. It's that nobody ever told them it existed. By the time this video is over, you're going to know not just that this window exists, but exactly how to use it and how to structure those 10 minutes in a way that keeps your body burning fat for hours after you've stopped moving. Here's what I want you to think about for a moment. How many times have you started an exercise routine with genuine commitment? You set the alarm, you bought the shoes, maybe you even got a gym membership. You showed up. You worked through the soreness. And for a little while, things felt like they were moving in the right direction. And then a plateau. The scale stopped. The energy dipped. The results that felt so close just stalled. And the frustrating part isn't even the plateau itself. It's that you were doing everything you were told to do. You were putting in the effort. You were sacrificing the sleep, the comfort, the time, and your body just wasn't cooperating the way the fitness videos promised it would. Sound familiar? For a lot of people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, this story repeats itself over and over, not because they're not trying hard enough, but because the exercise advice they've been following was designed for a 30-year-old body. After 50, the hormonal environment inside your body has shifted. Insulin sensitivity changes. Cortisol regulation shifts. The ratio of fat oxidation to glucose oxidation during exercise behaves differently. What worked at 30 genuinely doesn't produce the same results at 60, not because your body is broken, but because it needs a different kind of signal. And the good news, the really exciting news, is that science has found a signal that works better than almost anything else for this exact age group. And it requires nothing but a pair of shoes and 10 minutes of your morning. Before we get into the protocol itself, I want to ground everything that follows in why this information deserves your trust. The science of exercise physiology, specifically the study of how the body selects fuel sources during different types of movement, has been evolving rapidly over the last 15 years. Research from institutions including the University of Bath, the Karolinska Institute, and sports science departments at multiple universities has produced a clear and consistent picture. The body's fat-burning efficiency is not constant. It fluctuates based on hormonal state, time of day, metabolic context, and the intensity of movement. We're not talking about small differences. Studies measuring fat oxidation rates during exercise have found variations of 30% or more depending on when and how the exercise is performed. That 30% isn't a marketing number. It's a measurable physiological difference in how much stored body fat your cells actually break down and use for fuel. At DrFitHub, we track this research because understanding the mechanism is what separates advice that produces results from advice that just sounds good. So let's get into exactly what's happening in your body during that morning window and how to make it work for you. When you sleep, something remarkable happens inside your body. Over the course of 6 to 8 hours, your body gradually depletes the glycogen stored in your liver and muscles. Glycogen is essentially stored glucose, the body's preferred quick-access fuel source. When those glycogen reserves are low, your body shifts its fuel preference. It starts turning increasingly toward stored fat as its primary energy source. This is the fasted state, and it's the biological foundation for why fasted walking before you eat anything in the morning, produces dramatically higher rates of fat oxidation than walking after a meal. Research published in leading sports science journals has consistently shown that fat oxidation rates during moderate intensity exercise are significantly elevated in the fasted state compared to the fed state. And here's what makes this especially powerful for people over 50. In this age group, the shift from glucose dependency to fat dependency can be harder to trigger during fed exercise. The insulin response to a meal, even a small one, can effectively lock the door on fat burning for hours. But in the fasted morning state, that door is already open. Your body has been in fat burning mode all night. What you're doing with your morning walk is simply continuing and amplifying a process that's already underway. Now let's talk about the pace, because this is where most people either leave enormous potential on the table or accidentally work against themselves. The concept you need to understand here is the fat oxidation zone, and it is one of the most misunderstood ideas in exercise science. There is a specific range of exercise intensity where your body burns the highest proportion of calories from fat versus carbohydrate. That range is not as hard as you think. In fact, for most people, especially adults over 50, the optimal fat oxidation zone sits at roughly 50 to 65% of maximum heart rate. For someone who is 60 years old, that means a heart rate of roughly 96 to 124 beats per minute, depending on your individual fitness level. The simplest way to identify this zone without a heart rate monitor is the talk test. You should be walking briskly enough that conversation feels slightly effortful, but you can still speak in full sentences without gasping. If you're completely comfortable and could sing, you're below the zone. If you can barely get a word out, you've pushed above it. The fat oxidation zone is that sweet spot in between, and it's accessible to almost everyone, regardless of current fitness level. Here's the part that blew my mind when I first encountered the research. The 10-minute walk isn't just burning fat during those 10 minutes. When structured correctly, it triggers something called EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. EPOC is the scientific term for the phenomenon where your body continues to consume elevated amounts of oxygen and therefore burn elevated amounts of calories and fat for hours after the exercise itself has ended. This is the afterburn effect you may have heard of, typically associated with high-intensity training. But here's what the research has revealed. EPOC is not exclusive to intense exercise. When exercise is performed in the fasted state in the fat oxidation zone, the metabolic disruption it creates is sufficient to sustain elevated fat burning for 1 to 3 hours post-walk. That means your 10-minute morning walk, done correctly, becomes a fat-burning session that effectively lasts 2 to 4 hours. That changes the math entirely. You're not comparing 10 minutes to 60 minutes. You're comparing a brief, accessible morning effort with a multi-hour metabolic effect to a gym session with a significantly shorter tail. Now let's talk about what makes this 10-minute protocol specifically effective for people over 50, because the age component here is not incidental, it's central. As we get older, cortisol, the primary stress hormone, tends to spike more sharply in the morning and remain elevated longer. Chronic cortisol elevation is directly linked to abdominal fat accumulation and impaired fat oxidation. This sounds like bad news, but here's the twist. Moderate intensity fasted walking in the morning, particularly when it includes exposure to natural outdoor light, has been shown in research to actually help regulate cortisol rhythms. Natural light exposure in the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking triggers the release of serotonin, which in turn helps cortisol return to baseline faster. When cortisol normalizes, leptin, the hormone that signals satiety and supports fat burning, becomes more effective. So your morning walk isn't just burning fat through movement. It's actively rebalancing the hormonal environment that controls how easily your body burns fat for the rest of the day. The compounding effect of this over weeks and months is substantial. Research tracking adults over 50 who incorporated consistent morning walking found improvements not just in weight and body composition, but in fasting insulin levels, resting metabolic rate, and self-reported energy throughout the day. And this is where it gets even more interesting, because there's a specific structural element you can add to your 10-minute walk that research suggests can increase fat oxidation by an additional 15 to 20% on top of the fasted baseline. That element is interval variation. Not high-intensity interval training. Don't let that phrase intimidate you. What the research supports for this age group is something called polarized walking, alternating between a moderate base pace and brief bursts of a slightly faster pace, held for 30 to 60 seconds at a time, then returning to base. During your 10-minute walk, this might look like 2 minutes at your comfortable base pace, then 60 seconds of a noticeably brisker pace, then 2 minutes back to base, and so on. The physiological reason this works is that brief spikes in intensity create a greater metabolic demand, which then requires the body to draw more heavily on fat stores during the recovery period, the slower pace segments. It's essentially building mini epoch events into the walk itself. The recovery periods are where the fat burning accelerates, not during the fast segments. Studies examining fat oxidation during polarized low-intensity interval protocols have found that this approach outperforms steady-state walking at the same average pace in terms of total fat oxidized, even over short durations. For someone over 50, polarized walking also has the advantage of being joint-friendly, genuinely sustainable, and adaptable to almost any current fitness level. Now, I want to address some of the biggest misconceptions around morning walking and fat loss, because even well-meaning people get these wrong in ways that genuinely undermine their results. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is drinking a protein shake or eating even a small snack before their walk because they've been told that exercising on an empty stomach will burn muscle. Here's what most fitness influencers won't tell you. For a 10-minute moderate intensity walk, the risk of muscle catabolism, your body breaking down muscle for fuel, is essentially zero. Muscle breakdown during exercise becomes a real concern in very prolonged, high-intensity efforts, typically lasting more than 60 to 90 minutes. A 10-minute fasted walk at moderate intensity is nowhere near that threshold. The studies consistently show that short-duration fasted exercise preferentially burns stored fat, not muscle. By eating before the walk, you're doing the one thing that will reliably suppress fat oxidation, raising your insulin level, which signals the body to stop breaking down fat and start using glucose instead. The second myth I want to dismantle is that walking simply isn't enough exercise for meaningful fat loss. This belief has pushed millions of people into punishing gym routines that their joints and recovery capacity can't sustain, especially after 50. The research tells a different story. A consistent, correctly timed, and properly paced morning walk produces measurable reductions in visceral fat, the most dangerous and metabolically active fat stored around the organs, that rival more intense exercise protocols in adults over 50 when sustained over 12 or more weeks. Consistency at the right intensity beats intensity without consistency. Every single time. So here's what your morning routine should look like, starting tomorrow. Wake up, drink a full glass of water. Hydration is essential for fat metabolism and cortisol regulation, and research shows that even mild dehydration impairs both, and step outside within 30 minutes of waking. This timing matters. The earlier in the morning you catch natural light exposure, the stronger the serotonin-cortisol regulating effect, and the better your fat oxidation environment for the rest of the day. Your walk should begin at your comfortable base pace for about 90 seconds. Think of this as your warm-up, letting your joints and cardiovascular system ease into the movement. From there, begin your first interval, 60 seconds of a notably brisker pace. You know you've hit the right intensity when you feel your breathing deepen and your heart rate rise. Then return to your base pace for 2 full minutes. Repeat this cycle 3 times over the 10 minutes, ending with a 60-second cooldown at a very relaxed pace. During the walk, keep your arms engaged. A bent arm swing rather than straight arms actually increases energy expenditure measurably and helps maintain your fat oxidation zone intensity. After the walk, resist the urge to eat immediately. Research on post-fasted exercise fat oxidation shows that the elevated fat-burning state continues for up to 30 minutes after the walk ends if you remain in the fasted state. Have your water, have your coffee if that's part of your routine. Black coffee without sugar actually supports continued fat oxidation, and wait 30 minutes before eating your first meal. That window is where a significant portion of the post-walk fat-burning effect occurs. Do this 5 days a week. Not 7. Rest days support recovery and hormonal balance, both of which are critical for fat loss after 50. Track your consistency, not your perfection. Missing a day is not failure. Showing up the next morning is what builds the metabolic shift over time. Here's what I want to leave you with. You do not need to suffer to burn fat. You do not need to spend an hour on a treadmill. You do not need to push through joint pain or breathlessness that leaves you dreading tomorrow. What you need, what the science is telling you, is to work with the biology you already have. Every single morning, your body wakes up in a fat-burning state. It's been burning fat all night. Your fasted walk doesn't create that state from scratch. It extends and amplifies something your body is already doing naturally. That's a completely different relationship with exercise than most people over 50 have been taught to have. It's not about punishment. It's about timing. It's about strategy. And it's about understanding that 10 focused, science-aligned minutes can do more for your fat loss than an hour of uninformed effort. If this shifted something for you today, I'd be grateful if you'd hit the like button. It genuinely helps this kind of research reach the people who need it most. And if you're not subscribed to DrFitHub yet, this is your sign. We cover science-backed fat loss, metabolic health, and practical strategies for adults every single week. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one thing about your morning routine that you're going to change first? I read every single one. The science is on your side. Now go take that walk.